With a second Donald Trump presidency looking increasingly likely, how will it change the world? From ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine to China's pledge to retake control of Taiwan and the efforts to switch to a non-fossil fuel global economy, his policies will have a dramatic effect on all of us. I'm Neil Harvey, and today's newsmaker is Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are set to face off again in November in the first rematch between a current and a former president since 1892. The latest opinion polls, they put Trump ahead by between 2% and 4%, enough it would seem to secure victory. But what effect might his pledge to make America great again have on some of the world's biggest crises?
God bless you all.
As the momentum towards a second term for former President Donald Trump gathers pace, the man himself is becoming increasingly confident about the result.
There's never been the spirit that I've seen this time. 2016 was great, 2020 was better, the spirit, but this blows it away.
He's promising to make America great again.
Under my leadership, there was no inflation. We had the greatest economy in the history of the world. It's time to tell crooked Joe Biden, you're fired.
And for those disappointed after the last election, they're getting ready to welcome back their former president.
We're hoping that it goes for favor for Trump. We think at this point, he's going to get it. I mean, that's what we want. We're all go Trump.
73-year-old grandmother of 17, and I'm telling you, I've never in my lifetime seen this economy as bad as it is now. And I'm all for Donald Trump, and I want everybody to get out, and I want a red wave come November, because we need to take the House, the Senate, and the presidency back and keep this country great.
Analysts are scrutinizing what a Trump second term could mean not only for the US, but also for the rest of the world. Trump's unwavering support for Israel during his previous term, including the controversial decision to move the US embassy to Jerusalem, suggests he'll continue to support Israel. But not pressuring Israel to engage in peace talks could hinder progress towards a lasting peace in the region. Trump's inclination towards a transactional foreign policy raises doubts about his commitment to supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. His past statements about withdrawing from NATO and his reluctance to impose sanctions on Russia could embolden Moscow, further weakening Ukraine's position. With Trump's confrontational approach towards China, including the imposition of tariffs and heightened tensions over trade and technology, a second term could escalate US-China rivalry. Trump's reluctance to defend Taiwan against Chinese threats might raise the risk of military confrontation in the Taiwan Strait. Furthermore, his skepticism towards climate change would likely hinder global efforts to combat rising temperatures and sea levels. A second term under Trump could see a rollback of environmental regulations and a focus on promoting fossil fuel industries, further delaying the transition to a zero-carbon future. As the election draws nearer, many are nervous the return of Donald Trump to the White House could usher in a period of heightened geopolitical tension and setbacks in the fight against climate change.
Pleased to say I can speak now to Claudine Schneider, who is a former member of the US Congress and founder of Republicans for Integrity. Welcome to you, Claudine. Now, you've been described as a futurist for your views on climate change, clean energy, biodiversity. What would a President Donald Trump mean for your view of the future of the ecology of the planet?
Total disaster. Absolutely. A total disaster. He denies the reality of science, and he is eager to dismantle everything that President Joe Biden has installed.
When he was president in his first term, Donald Trump took the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement, but he didn't do it without reason. he argued this was bad for the economy, something that he was predominantly focused on. He said it would cost America trillions of dollars, and he said it would kill jobs, particularly for people who are working in oil, coal, and gas mining industries. I mean, can you see his point to some extent that this would hurt financially a lot of people?
Absolutely no, because what we are finding is that clean energy creates more jobs than it destroys. And the legislation that President Biden has introduced last year has made it possible for more than 200,000 workers to be engaged in everything from the manufacturing of solar and wind products to the installation, as well as involved in energy efficiency, energy conservation. And also, we are still drilling an enormous amount of fossil fuels. So it has not had a negative impact at all on the economy, but rather has been boosting the economy.
What about the question, though, about job losses? I mean, Donald Trump is a politician, so he's thinking short term. He's thinking next 4 years. You know, fighting climate change, that's a long-term view. What would you do about the job losses? What would you say to the people who would lose jobs?
Well, the number of people who are losing jobs is being offset by people gaining jobs. And many of those folks who have the potential, for example, are involved in coal mining. There are transition jobs available for them now to learn new skills and to move into different sectors of our economy. So the reality is that the United States, as well as the world, has to understand that Donald Trump's stock in trade is fear. If he scares you, then you're going to be inclined to vote for him. But if you're fearless, like most of us are, we realize that it's all talk in order for him to gain power. And the reality is that he cares primarily for himself, not so much about the people who are currently working in any sector of any part of our energy sector.
Donald Trump claimed that when he was president, he did take measures to improve the environment. But at the same time, he had this argument that you've got India, you've got Russia, you've got China pumping pollution into the air. And his argument was that while they continue to do that, these major industrial nations, any efforts that the US makes is going to be minimal. What would you say in response to that?
We are all in this climate challenge together. And the United States, I believe, has to be leading in this area. We are not now. So many of the European countries are providing incredible leadership. And there are a handful of countries now whose economies are doing very well, that are nearly carbon neutral, like Costa Rica and a number of other countries throughout the world. So it is absolutely ridiculous what Donald Trump is saying in this regard about energy and about many other things, because we are creating more jobs now, more manufacturing jobs, more mining jobs of precious minerals in order to produce solar panels and other energy efficiency products. And as a matter of fact, Joe Biden has made a commitment to reduce greenhouse gases by 2030, to cut them in half. And I believe that we're well on our way. So I am optimistic that we will achieve that. I might also mention that President Biden has instituted for the first time something called the Climate Corps to train young people in a variety of different jobs that will help minimize greenhouse gases. And I might also mention that when I was in Congress, I introduced legislation that was the first of its kind to make appliances more energy efficient. And those energy efficient standards are now global. So households are saving billions of dollars because our appliances are much more energy efficient. So there's much that we can do.
Claudine, thanks so much for your time. Great to get your views. Appreciate them. My guest, former Republican
Great.
member
Thank you
of
very
Congress,
much.
Claudine Schneider there. Joining me now are, from Washington, Republican strategist Adolfo Franco. From Columbus, Ohio, president of the Society for Historians of American Foreign Relations, Mitch Lerner. He's also professor of American history at The Ohio State University. And joining us from London is Emeritus Professor of United States Studies at University College London. That's Iwan Morgan. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. Let's come first to Adolfo Franco. Adolfo, Donald Trump supported clearly Israel in his first term as president. Yes. Based on comments he's made since then, it appears that he still supports Israel in the context of the Gaza conflict that's ongoing. So do you think he would support, in that situation, a two-state solution?
Well, I think he will support anything that is reasonably negotiated on Israel's terms. And I think the Israeli government, be it this government or, frankly, another government that would come to power in Israel, wants a solution to the conflict that might involve a two-state solution if the security of Israel can be guaranteed. So I think that has been certainly a debate that's been going on for decades, and at different times progress has been made in this regard in some sense with negotiations, but it's obviously never come to anything to fruition. However, what he will not do is what this administration is doing, and we have a hot mic. When President Biden at the State of the Union said that he's going to have a come-to-Jesus moment with Prime Minister Netanyahu, is pressure the Israeli government to take a position or a stance with regard to a two-state solution that is not in their interest. And therein is the big difference between the two candidates. You really have a much stronger supporter for Israel. I can assure you that if Prime Minister Netanyahu had to choose who he wanted in the White House today, it would not be Joe Biden.
Mitch, let's bring you in. In the aftermath of the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel, Donald Trump said about the Israeli Prime Minister, quote, "I will never forget that Netanyahu let us down." Now, his comments, they were a reference to Israel pulling out at the last moment from cooperating with America on the 2020 assassination of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. But to choose that moment in the wake of a deadly attack on Israel, that moment to criticize the Israeli leader, does that tell us that while Trump might still be pro-Israel, he might not necessarily be pro-Netanyahu?
Well, that's true to a certain point, but President Trump does tend to issue oral statements, and they don't always represent a well-thought-out position, and he retracts from them later. So I can't really say in depth there that he is opposed to Netanyahu. I suspect that if Mr. Netanyahu would prefer to have the re-election of Mr. Trump as president of the United States, it may be the case that Mr. Trump would prefer a more secure and generally a more consensual figure in Israel.
Mitch, Trump was pro-Israel when he was in power. He said this month Israel must finish its problem when referring to its war with Hamas. How does such a pro-Israeli view, though, come when you look at trying to negotiate peace?
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize, listening to both of the speakers ahead of me, I think there's some truth to what they're saying, but let's draw a distinction between rhetoric and reality. Right? When Trump was president, he recognized Israeli control of the Golan. He moved the U.S. capital to Jerusalem. So I think regardless of what he's saying, it's pretty clear that Trump is going to give Netanyahu a blank check to do what he wants in Gaza. Biden is a figure, as your first speaker said, of a little bit more restraint. But in the end, whatever anybody has to say, Trump is clearly going to support Israel to whatever degree Netanyahu wants.
Ewan, coming back to you, can I just say, how do you get a fair deal, though? If what I'm hearing is, and certainly from Adolfo, is that there'll be a peace deal, but on the terms of Israel. Surely any agreement has to be something that both sides feel is satisfactory. Hamas have done nothing to suggest that they're going to take half measures.
Well, that is the problem, and it's been a problem for a long time in the Middle East. How do you get an agreement that both sides can feel that they get something from? Certainly, security for Israel is key to any American president, and really has been since the US government recognized Israel after World War II. So that's a critical first step for any American government. But we've reached a stage now in the Middle East that it's a highly destabilized region. This is the most dangerous conflict in many years in the Middle East, because there's potential to spill out and involve regional actors like Iran. We've already seen it with the Houthi rebels firing on international shipping in the Red Sea. So the Americans are very, very concerned to get some kind of stable settlement before the region erupts into open conflagration. But getting it is going to be a very difficult means. And President Biden was quite clearly over-optimistic in suggesting that there would be a deal on the table some days ago.
And Mitch Lerner, how would you? Sorry, you want to come in with a response there, Adolfo?
What I want to make clear here, from my perspective, being here 40 years and in government and involved in these issues, is the following. President Nixon said it. The Israelis aren't going to take it. And what he meant by that is the United States, for a lot of other reasons, unlike other countries, is not going to impose on Israel a solution or lean on. And this come to Jesus moment from this president of all presidents, such a weak figure and a questionable figure. I'm sure we'll get to Iran in a moment, which is really the core problem here. If you think that the United States is going to impose or demand that Israel take some stance, that's just not going to happen. And it is a domestic issue in the United States. So, and the vast majority of certainly political figures and policymakers in the United States are squarely with Israel. Even those that are not, would wish otherwise for political reasons, will not take on Israel in the United States. So it has to be, when I say that, something the Israelis feel comfortable with, but of course the Palestinians would have to accept, and the Arabs as well.
Gentlemen, I'd like to move us on to how would a President Donald Trump affect the conflict still ongoing in Ukraine. So first to you, Mitch Lerner. Today we heard the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, say that Donald Trump had said to him he will not give money to Ukraine, and that the consequence of that will be the end of the war, because he says that Ukraine cannot stand financially and in terms of weapons on its own. But is that not the same as Donald Trump supporting Russia in the conflict?
Indirectly, it absolutely is. And Trump, I think, has made it pretty clear. He has pledged, I think, that he would end the war day one of his presidency. And while that's obviously somewhat hyperbolic, I think the fear that people have is that he's going to work to cut off supplies to Ukraine, which would mean the end of their effort to fight back. Now, the reality is that the European nations have stepped up and have provided significant aid to Ukraine. Perhaps that war would continue for a while without American support. But the truth is, again, if you look at Trump's record, the idea that he's going to stand up to Putin and challenge him on this annexation effort seems really kind of silly. So yes, I think this would be giving Putin the reward that he wants for the aggressive assault that he launched.
Ewan Morgan, Trump, of course, he was accused, he was investigated, he was cleared of conspiring with Russia. But in that context, is it not very difficult for him to negotiate some kind of peace deal between Ukraine and Russia without then being accused of favouring Russia?
Well, that is going to be a problem for him. I think that President Putin in Russia sees the re-election of Donald Trump as his best hope of bringing the war to an end within the next 15 to 18 months. quite clearly the Europeans are willing to support Ukraine, but without the United States there as the leader of the Western alliance in support of Ukraine, I don't think the European Union will be able to maintain adequate financial support. It'll also be devastating for Ukrainian morale if Trump cuts off all American aid. And what's going on in the United States at the moment, it appears to be that because Ukrainian aid was wrapped up into a border legislation, which really gave the Republicans all they had asked for in terms of border security in the United States in return for Ukrainian aid being part of the package. And then when Trump apparently pulled the plug on that, the Republicans in the House killed the deal. So that's an indication of where we're going.
Adolfo, Donald Trump said about the conflict in Ukraine that he would get Putin into a room, he would get Zelensky into a room, he'd get them together and he'd work out a deal. He's a businessman and he made it sound like a very simple deal to accomplish. Having heard that rhetoric, Volodymyr Zelensky said it was very dangerous and he said it's making me a bit stressed. His concern was that Trump would be so keen to get a deal that it might not be a deal that was in the best interests of Ukraine. Is there a worry here that Donald Trump will be so enthusiastic to do a deal that perhaps suits America best, that perhaps suits Donald Trump best, that it might not suit Ukraine?
But I want to just respond to a couple things. First of all, I find it curious that it's completely okay to have a come to Jesus moment with Benjamin Netanyahu, to frankly lean on Israel, to say that this has to stop, this Israeli aggression has to stop, supposedly aggression, and that there's a complete stance on Israel that is wholly different. There are different circumstances, I understand, but I find it curious that we're not leaning on coming to a ceasefire or some solution, or at least discussions with respect to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So I find those two remarkably different approaches that do not seem to me inconsistent. But one has to remember that in 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, and for all the stance about all the outrage and everything that's happened with Russia, I didn't see the Obama administration do anything. I think they sent blankets at the end. At the time, Republicans in Congress, and I was involved in this effort, wanted military and lethal aid to Ukraine, which was strongly resisted by the Obama administration. And that was, of course, with Vice President Biden, who again opposed any support for Ukraine that was meaningful at that time. I didn't see the outrage at that time. Of course, the conflict in Ukraine has happened under two Democrat administrations. In the Trump years, nothing happened in Ukraine, which tells you something about the stability we had globally under President Trump that we do not have today, whether it's Israel, Ukraine, or elsewhere.
So I just want to move things on now to China and Taiwan. And if I can come to you, Mitch Lerner. This year, when asked if US forces would intervene if China attacked Taiwan, Trump was pretty evasive. And he went on to talk about how Taiwan had stolen America's computer chip manufacturing business. What do you think he would do in that event if China was to get aggressive with Taiwan?
So it's a great question. And the truth is, I'm not sure anyone knows. When we talk about the differences between Trump and Biden, their policies towards China are likely to remain largely the same, right? Trump implemented tariffs on steel and other trade issues with China. Biden preserved them, even expanded them, some semiconductor policies. And the links between the two countries, economically, strategically, really mean that both presidents, whoever wins, will likely bash China and keep hostility up. The difference will be Taiwan. Biden has made it really clear that he believes in that alliance with Taiwan. He will certainly, at least rhetorically, he says, he will defend Taiwan. Trump has not made that commitment. I think this goes to Trump's larger worldview. He is much more transactionalist, right? Biden is this sort of liberal internationalist. He believes in NATO. He believes in the long-standing Western alliance between democratic capitalist nations. Trump is a little bit more short-term. He wants what he thinks is in the best interest of himself and the United States immediately. And what that means for Taiwan, is he willing to fight? It's really an open question.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm afraid the clock's got the better of us. We're going to have to wrap it up there. Appreciate your contributions. Adolfo Franco, Mitch Lerner and Iwan Morgan, thanks so much for being part of the programme. And indeed, thanks to you guys for watching. Make sure to follow us on X and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Neil Harvey. Thanks for your company. See you next time.